And so we traveled, we sang at missions, we traveled all over the country, and we sang all over the country. My sisters were extremely talented musicians. I just kind of tagged along. But I was serving in the church. I was going to church every Sunday, but I was also living this double life of sin and living in a way that was very displeasing to God. And I would always confess the sin, and I would always try to stop, but I couldn't stop. And then he tells me, if you don't stop, you're going to die. And so I'm trying. About this time, my friends begin to die, and their lives begin to come to an end, or the sin that they were engaged in begins to catch them, and they begin to go to the penitentiary and things of that nature. And I remember I traveled from church to church to church to church to church, and everywhere I went, preachers stood up and said, stop sinning, or God's going to get you. And I remember I would sit in churches like this, and I would sit back there on the pew, and I would just get angry with the preacher. And I would say, okay, all right, I get it. I want to stop. I just don't know how. Somebody tell me how to stop. I can't stop. And I remember I would walk down aisles, and every preacher led me in a different prayer, and I prayed all these different prayers, and I went to back rooms and prayed prayers, and I did all this stuff, and I found out there was no magic prayer. And I would go and I would talk to people, and I'd say, you know, I've really got a problem and I need to quit. Can you help me quit? And they didn't seem to have any answers. Church seemed absolutely powerless to help me. In the meantime, an evangelist came along, and my sister and I began to travel with him, and we began to sing while he preached all over the country. And I found myself thinking, you know, this will help me. I'll serve the Lord full time here, and as I serve the Lord full time, you know, He'll help me quit somehow. And so I would serve the Lord and try not to sin, you know, with all my heart. There are some people who come into churches and they sit down and they think, you know, hey, I'm better than all these people. I wish these other people were as good as me. I was not one of those people. I was one of those people that came and sat in church and thought, man, I am so sorry. All these other people, they don't seem to have any problems. They don't seem to sin, but I'm the guy that just can't get it together. At the age of 23, in one of those revival meetings, it was my habit to go pray while the preacher was preaching. And one night I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired and being who I am and who I was, that I went into a back room and I got on my knees and I said, God, it's not your fault. It's my fault. I'm just a mess up. And I guess I've just been a mess up my whole life. But I just can't live like this anymore. I'm just tired. And my dad had also told me, be careful what you pray for. God answers your prayers. And so this wasn't any idle thing. I said, go ahead and kill me. I don't have the courage to kill myself, but I'm tired of living this way. And so, kill me. I'm ready to go. I don't want to go to hell, but I don't want to live anymore like this. And God did an amazing thing that night. And it's not the experience, but I'm going to share with you the experience that happened that night. In a back room, I came face to face with God. I had an Isaiah 6 experience. I was not in that room anymore. I was in heaven, and I saw God. I saw Jesus. And I saw Him sitting at the right hand of the Father. And I've never in my life seen anything so beautiful, so powerful, so holy, so real. And I remember it was a wooden floor, and I remember I was flat on my face on the wooden floor, and if I could, I'd have pulled the wood up and crawled under the floor. That's how embarrassed and ashamed I was in His presence. And I remember Him telling me, I don't want to kill you. And I remember I said, God, I'm so unclean. I'm so filthy. And I remember Him saying at that time, I can clean you. And He did, and He cleansed me. And I can't explain it. I just know He just washed me clean. And when he washed me clean, I could breathe again, and I found myself in his presence again. Just, what do you want? And I heard him say, who will I send and who will go for me? And I said, I'll go, Lord. There's something about when you come to the end and you're ready to die, where after that, it's not your life. Does that make sense? And I felt like a man who had got a second chance at life. And I felt like one, and this maybe sounds corny to you, and forgive me if it's corny, but at heart, I'm a soldier. That's what I am. And that night, I surrendered my sword to Jesus. And I said, whatever you want. Wherever you send me, I'll go. Whatever you want, I'll do. And he said, to Africa. And I said, God, I still don't want to go to Africa. But you know what? If that's where you want me to go, I'll go. And now that I know who you are and how big you are and how strong you are, and there's nothing you're afraid of, I'll go to Africa if that's what you want. And he said this, he said, no, not to Africa, but to America. But the price will be the same. And from that day on, I understood that my calling in life was to be a missionary to America. The problem with Americans is they don't think we need missionaries. I was talking to a woman from Nigeria the other day, and she said her country sends missionaries to America because America is a more pagan nation than their nation is. She said the Christians in her country are more Christian than the Christians here. She said the Christians here talk Christianity, but they don't live it. But the Christians in her country live it. And so they send missionaries to America to try to convince Americans to serve Christ and to be true Christians. God called me as a missionary to America at that point in time of my life. He allowed me to teach some Bible studies and to do some things, and I found myself just desperately in love with Him. I don't consider myself a dynamic speaker or preacher by any means, and you'll find that out tonight and tomorrow. Just simply a man that, and to be honest with you, before then, I was the quietest person you ever met. I considered myself a man of action, not of words. Other people could talk. I was just going to do it. I wasn't going to talk about it. Folks used to say the problem with Edward is he just talks too much, and then they'd all laugh because they knew that the opposite was true. I just didn't feel the need to talk to anybody about anything, and so I never talked. And then God touched me, and literally He touched my tongue, and He said, I'm going to send you, and you're going to speak what I tell you to say. And so I began to go, and I began to understand, okay, God, you're going to have to do it through me, and He would. He just spoke through me. Met my wonderful wife, got married, had 5 children. They're all grown now, and some are in college, some are married, and moving on with their lives. God's really blessed us. But I didn't see this ministry I thought God had for me begin to materialize. Got involved in the abortion struggle. Came under deep conviction that God had called us, and He said, rescue those who are drawn to the slaughter. And if you say, I didn't know, doesn't He who see the hearts know? And will He not repay you according to what you've done? Or in this case, not done? It was at that point in time I began to do some rescues, went to jail. Talking to one of my friends about it in the ministry, he said to me, don't you know this is going to kill your ministry? And that was the first time I realized that serving Jesus could ruin your reputation and kill your ministry. But I had to make a decision. Do I do what God's telling me to do, or do I have a ministry? And exactly what is a ministry if it's not what God's telling you to do? And so then I began to understand that following Jesus was much more than that. When God called me to preach, I was telling someone earlier, my dad had a unique way of discipleship. He said, come with me.